Well, it's been a while since I last saw you. At my reckoning, it's been 2 weeks since you got the first half of this particular talk about not leaving one's work undone. If you recall, we are gradually working our way through the blessings of the Mangala Sutta, which concern family harmony. And having gone into probably much too much detail about looking after our parents, children, husband, wife, tagged on the end of all that is the fact that for a family to enjoy harmony, there needs to be a sense of financial security. And this often means being quick off the mark to earn one's living, or at least not to beat about the bush in earning one's living, to seize the day and go out and make sure you have the ability to stand on your own 2 feet, financially speaking. And last time I saw you, as a little bit of a reminder, we had fun things like panic monsters and various other numbskulls in our head which caused prevarication in our lives. And we did a good job, I think, of identifying some of the things which cause us to and not to get on with the job, even though we know it needs doing. So we set it up to see all the downside of prevarication last time, and hopefully today we can move on with some strategies to overcome prevarication in life, especially when I explained that many of the important things in our lives don't seem to have a deadline attached to them. Things like meditation, things like doing good things for the relationships in our lives, or really doing the things that define our lives or give meaning to our lives, make us feel proud of our lives. They are not things where we can just pin a deadline on them. So much of the received knowledge from management isn't going to help us very much to get that sense of urgency, perhaps, that we need to do the things that are important in our lives. So today perhaps we can look at some of the strategies for non-prevarication, both in the worldly ways, which I've talked about, which might affect us financially, but also on a spiritual level of meaning in life as well, so that we can focus on the things that bring meaning in life. So, strategies for non-prevarication. As we said, we don't believe that anyone is a lazy person. But there are certain things that get in the way of people getting that sort of momentum that they need to really sort things out in life. And some of the things which are mentioned are people lacking the ability to do things at the appropriate time, in the appropriate way, or get started in the first place, or have a sense of being enthusiastic and conscientious. And from the Buddhist scriptures, there's a part of the scriptures called the Samyutta Nikaya, where there is a scripture called the Alavaka Sutta, which talks a lot about the different qualities which are required to get any particular task done. The first is known as approaching work in the appropriate way, sometimes known in the Pali language as Patirupa Gari, where you need to put into practice all the knowledge and craftsmanship which you've learned in blessings number 7 and number 8, and to realize that when you're new to a job, then you need to learn from any mistakes. You shouldn't make the same mistakes, if at all possible, more than once. Yeah, no one would blame you for making a mistake once, but the thing is to learn from it quickly so that you don't repeat it. So that's how to go about doing it in the appropriate way. The second thing is to having the willingness to work and to challenge your own previous abilities, which is known in Pali language as durawa. And this may mean that, however humble the task is that you are working on, you should never look down on it as it's somehow beneath you or your skill set. A person who's really skilled can make a good job of anything, no matter how humble. The third one is that you need to have a certain level of keenness and quickness, liveliness perhaps, in the way that you work. And this in Pali language is known as uttata. And if you have the tendency to, let's say, lethargy, then maybe you need to take up a sport. So, is there a recipe for success in our worldly lives? And again, Buddhism does provide quite a lot of guidance in this respect, in the form of a four-step set of qualities which you need to bring to any task which you do, even if it's your work job or your day job. They're known, they come from the Digha Nikaya's Sangiti Sutta, and sometimes they're known as the four foundations of power or four foundations of success. The technical name for them in Pali is Itipatha, so they give you power, or they're the 4 feet of power. So I'll come back to the spiritual applications because they can also be applied to that as well. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But the very first thing which you need is what's known as initial motivation or chanta. Often you hear in Buddhism, oh, you mustn't have any attachment to anything. But there are certain sorts of attachment which are good for you. And in such a case, they are not known by the name of greed or desire, but they are known by the word chanta, which means moving towards something which is beneficial in the long term for you. So you might equate it with a sense of willingness or getting down to do the work. And without this, you would never make a start. So you need to sort of conjure up the mood, first of all, in order to make the first step towards doing the work. So you haven't actually done the work yet, but you've conjured up the willingness to do it. Yeah? Chanta. After that comes the next step, which is known as initial application, which you might refer to in Pali as viriya, or if you come to meditation, it might be known as vitakka. So what it tells you is that having conjured up the motivation to do something, you let out the clutch and you actually apply yourself to do the work in the proper way. And starters, you mean to go on. So often this means striking the right balance between productivity and enjoyment. Not just work, 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 but you need to enjoy it as you're going along. The third one is what's known as sustained application, which in Pali might be referred to as citta, or in the context of meditation as vichara. It means that starting out well is not enough, but you need to somehow sustain the effort. Pace yourself. It takes practice. If you're new to, let's say, swimming, you might feel awkward or unskilled on the first day at the pool, have lots of aches and pains, but if you keep it up little by little, one day you might become an Olympic champion. And the important thing in this respect is you need to keep on going until you complete whatever task it is. So have that, be able to pace yourself to reach completion. And last but not least, there's what's known as retrospective analysis, or vimamsa, which means that you need to look back over the task you've done each time in order to give yourself feedback by looking for even better or more efficient ways to do it, the same task the next time round. And remedy any weaknesses you have as quickly as possible so they don't impede you next time you come to do the same thing again. And even if you have success in your task, it shouldn't stop you analyzing, going back over it so that you can repeat next time round. Often we're so flushed with our success that we forget to ask how we managed to do it. which means that we fail to replicate that next time around. So if you can follow these 4 simple principles, then in your professional life, you will find that success will be just around the corner. In terms of spiritual work, sometimes it's not obvious that there's a task there to be done at all. But as meditators, we start to realize the state which our mind is in, especially once we start to work on it in meditation, until we realize that the mind in itself is a task to be mastered. Yeah? And according to the Buddha, I quote the Akkamaniya Sutta, he said there's great danger in neglecting the work of taming our mind. And he said, I do not perceive even one other thing that, when left undeveloped and uncultivated, entails such great suffering as the mind. Because the mind, when undeveloped and uncultivated, entails great suffering. So it would therefore appear that just as we ought to be able to apply the Ittipata in our working lives as a recipe for success, then equally energetically we ought to be able to apply those Ittipata to working with our mind to improve the quality so that we don't neglect it and end up with suffering as a result. So how do we do this? Well, we can apply the Ittipata recipe also to working with the mind, and this may be something that you've heard of previously from other monks who have been sitting here, sometimes known as the 4 C's, sometimes known as 5, depends on how you divide them up. Familiar? No? Wow, you look like you're concentrating very hard, so maybe it is new to you. They all start with a C, although I might need to explain a little bit what they all mean. But for ease of remembering, you can start with conducive, then you can move on to comfort, conscious, and then consistent and checking. And this is how we have applied our Ittipata, or the 4-step recipe for success, to working with the mind. So to come to the first of these, conduciveness. Just now we had the willingness to do the job, to do the task. Yeah? Meditation is no different, because we also need to have a sense of willing to cultivate ourselves. Rather than waiting for the inclination to meditate to accidentally arise, you need to look for ways to put yourself in the mood to meditate. So you might generate enthusiasm by, let's say, reading up on the benefits of meditation, or perhaps seeking out a nearby meditation group so you feel embarrassed if you don't do your meditation because everyone else is like doing it. And if you're meditating at home, then you might take some special trouble to create the ideal conditions to meditate in, ones that you have tested out in the past, that will put you in the right sort of mood, the best time of day, the most conducive activity beforehand, like maybe taking a shower or doing some exercise, or maybe even creating a conducive corner for your meditation at home, or investing in an especially comfortable meditation cushion. Yeah? Conducive. C for conducive. From there we can move on to the next one, which is a sort of double C in a way. Initial application, as it's applied to the mind, is a balance between 2 particular C's, C for comfort and C for conscious. In other words, we need to maintain focus in our meditation alongside a feeling of comfort. So focus is like sort of somehow harder, putting the mind on whatever it needs to focus on, whereas comfort has a sense of being able to be sustainable and more gentle. So you need to find your sweet spot to keep yourself in the zone of the meditation. Focus in our meditation goes alongside the sense of comfort, and sometimes they have defined comfort as accepting yourself as you are. That's probably the best way to describe it. It can be achieved by physical relaxation. It can also be achieved by a sense of mental comfort and gentleness. But if you get too comfortable, then you will fall asleep. So there needs to be a sense of balance. Keeping that sense of consciousness needs focus, which you would use by having some sort of object in your meditation, visualization, mantra. If you have no focus, then you're just gone into the comfort. Sometimes it's being compared, this balance between the two, as like a dirt road. I'll give you some metaphors. Because for as long as you stay on the road with the two twin tracks, you don't slip off it, even if it's four-wheel drive, then you don't need to call out the tractor. Yeah? So all you need to do is stay on the road. Don't let yourself slip off or out of balance. And comfort and conscious will be held and sustainable. Another way is to think of it as twin tracks on a railway, where you need to maintain a sense of balance hand in hand between the two. And being able to keep that up gives you your fourth C, which is consistent. So we had sustainable, seeing it through to completion. How can you keep yourself on the track continuously without letting yourself slip off and having to get the tractor out? Well, it's keeping that, adjusting constantly in your meditation to keep that going. This is what's meant by consistency, which will be the third step of the four here. Sometimes it can be aided by having a sense of routine in your life. So doing it at the same time every day helps you establish that consistency in your practice. Sometimes it can be to do with maintaining mindfulness outside your practice so that you can keep that same consistent balance between comfort and conscious going even outside your practice, so that it becomes something you can do all day long. And I probably don't need to remind you that that's the sort of thing which retreats are very good for, to be able to build up that sense of consistency. And the components of that, if you imagine the rail tracks just now, we can now imagine them as a red and a yellow rail track. And this is a little diagram which they've used a lot in our main temple recently, to say that the red is the ease or the comfort, the yellow is the focus or the conscious. So what we do is, every time we meditate, we take our mind and we place it with the blue cross. It can be at the center of your body, it can be somewhere else in your body that feels comfortable. But from there, then we need to maintain the two together. Comfort, conscious, consistently. Not to slip off the track, but there are lots of things trying to pull us off the track. And we need to be prepared the whole time to readjust our balance every time we come across, let's say, sleepiness or distraction. Then that's going to try and pull us off in the direction of too much comfort. Yeah? On the other side, we've got things trying to pull us off the track, which are tension, trying too hard. Or sometimes it's preempting, for those of us who've had a good meditation experience in the past and we want to recreate it somehow. We're thinking, oh, it's getting good in our meditation. In fact, that's grasping after results. So, one way or another, they're trying to pull you off the track. Yeah. But if you can keep it going, keep within the zone, keep in your sweet spot continuously, at some point you will get to the point where the penny drops in your meditation, which is what's known in the white circle there as some sort of inner experience arising. So that is 3 of the 4 so far in meditation. Leaves us with one more, which is, we should mention, what should you do if you find yourself pulled off the track, apart from getting the tractor out? They say there's no harm in resetting in your meditation practice, which means if you find you're too far off the track, just place your mind and start again. And you might think, after all the trouble I've taken so far, but don't think like that. It's better to just reapproximate to the path. And if you do that, then very soon you'll find yourself staying on the path, rather than just sort of persevering when you've gone completely off the track. Yeah? So, finally, there's the one more element of the recipe for success, which is checking, which you might explain as retrospective analysis, which means going back over your meditation after you finish the practice to ask yourself, could I have done it better? Where did I go right? Where did I go wrong in the meditation? And try to incorporate the successes of your meditation into future practices. So this is completing the quality control loop of your meditation in just the same way you would have quality control in what you do in your workplace. And that would be the 4 C's, or the 5 C's as I put it here, according to meditation practice. If you don't remember anything else on meditation practice, please try to remember that. Very important. Otherwise you can spend years waiting for a tractor to come. So, we looked at some of the problems of waiting for things to happen. And as I mentioned in the first half of this lecture, the Buddha was of the belief that if everything is set to start to do a task, that in itself is a good enough reason to get on with it. You don't need to wait for your lucky stars to appear in the sky to get down to doing it. Otherwise, then you may miss opportunities that really you deserve. And there's a funny story from the scriptures about someone who was very superstitious, and they were about to get married. And you will remember that one of the reasons that people put things off is that they're waiting for their horoscope to come through or whatever. Another reason was that people are too drunk to remember what they're doing. Yeah? You remember? And this is a story about someone getting married, okay? And they were they were a strong believer in getting married at the right time so that their marriage would last. And you might think, that sounds really archaic, but this is actually from a newspaper last month in India, and it's apparently still happening. Bride marries a relative at altar after drunk groom fails to turn up on time. So basically they marry someone else instead. India are really, really good about this. Why waste all the money from the wedding reception? Just like get her married to someone else. And she was fine with that. He didn't want to marry some drunk anyway. As now, it was then as well. And the story about a man who lived in a town called Savatthi, and he intended to marry a lady from the same city. And having fixed the day to come and fetch the bride, he subsequently consulted a fortune teller who was familiar with his family as to whether the stars were right and favorable for holding the wedding festival that day. And the fortune teller was not happy because, according to the fortune teller's feeling, really he should have been asked first. So he thought he would get his own back on this guy, and he said, the day which you fixed for the wedding is not going to work out. The nuptials should not be celebrated on that day. Great misfortune would come of it. And the man was so scared, because he believed everything the fortune teller said, he decided not to turn up for his own wedding. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the bride and all her friends were waiting in the town hall, I suppose, with all the wedding reception already organized and paid for, and the groom's family didn't turn up. So the bride waited and waited, and her family thought, well, it was the groom who decided the wedding date, and they've still not come. So we've gone to quite a lot of expense, because normally it comes on that side of the family, right? Let's find someone else to marry our girl to. So they got another bridegroom, happened to be one they prepared earlier, and they got him married with all the festivities which they'd already prepared. And the bride took the whole dowry in compensation for the groom having broken the marriage contract. So in India they have nice things like that. And on the new date, which the fortune teller had given the unsuccessful groom, the groom turned up and they said, oh, why have you come? You country folk are a bad lot. You fixed the day yourselves, and they insulted us by not coming. So sorry, we've married the bride to someone else. So this is the origin of the Buddha's advice that readiness itself is all you need to propitiate success in any activity. So you don't need a fortune teller to tell you whether success will be achieved or not on a certain date. And if you do persist in superstitious beliefs, then you, like the gullible groom, might lose everything you had prepared for. So for today, I will just finish off with a few announcements. Things you don't already know. Next full moon, after our nice event on the May full moon day, I'm not sure we'll be able to match up to that one again, but certainly we will have a in-person as well as online Strawberry Moon celebration, which will be on Tuesday, the 14th of June, and which happens to fit with our normal Tuesday class anyway. But if you would prefer to follow that online, then it's with all the usual Zoom details as well. We're still accepting applications for the European Monk Program, which will take place at the beginning of June. 2 weeks of training in Denmark, and after that then the monks are sent back to their home temple to finish up for the remainder of the month if they wish to do so as well. Also, we are progressing rapidly in our preparations for the retreat down in Somerset, and there is a special early bird rate for those who sign up early for that retreat and pay in advance as well. So for today, I think that's all I would like to leave you with.